Maybe you saw it around the Twitter sphere. It was going all over the place. They actually turned off comments, which is a little weird, just being honest. For an online media company, it's a little weird to turn off the comments, but they decided to do it. So we are talking about the TGC bus article. Oh yes, the bus. Let me first, before we get into it, let me just say, hey, a few things. Think about, if you're here watching this live, hit the like button. That tells YouTube to go and let other people know that we're talking about this stuff, and they can come in. We could have a conversation. If you're new to the channel, hey, you got to do all the things. Think about subscribing to the channel. You don't have to, but I would appreciate it if you just thought about it. We do this every Monday. I do this every Monday. So all that being said, and hop into the chat. Let me know what you think about all this kind of stuff. We'll be checking in with the chat every so often as we go. But before we get into this bus article, I need to stop, because some of you might be like, okay, what's the big deal about this thing? Well, if you have been kind of plugged into the evangelical world over the last 2 years, you've heard a lot about buses, because there was a famous clip that I remember hearing way back in the day, because I'm a Pacific Northwest guy. But there was a famous clip of Mark Driscoll talking about the bus and how you better get on the bus or you're going to get run over by the bus. And he's talking about his church, and that he's basically the bus driver, and he's going to run people over, and there are a bunch of bodies underneath the bus. That's what he said. That went all over the place. That was featured heavily throughout the rise and fall of Mars Hill, which I really think is like a touching stone for evangelicalism. This is one of the most popular things, I think. But I just want that to be said, because this article wasn't written in a vacuum like anything else. Everything has a place. And so this article about the bus, I think, is really trying to play off of that. And Brett McCracken, guys, I don't have huge beef with TGC. All right, I had the TGC Canada director on my show. We're buds. I like a lot of the guys at TGC. But when I saw this article, I was like, oh no, because I know where it's coming from. I know what the bus means. And I kind of already knew just from the title where it was going to go. Because this time we're not talking about just the bus as in, congregants. We're trying to talk about it as pastors. Sometimes pastors get thrown underneath the bus. And that's accurate. Hey, that happens. All right. As someone who has been a pastor currently, working on planting a church. So I get it. Pastors get bullied all the time by congregants. Sometimes congregants can be real mean and be pretty controlling about what the pastor is supposed to say and what they're not supposed to say, specifically online. So I get it. But I have some huge problems with this article. So I'll just read the beginning part. It says, I've noticed an increasing prevalent genre of online evangelical Christian commentary in which pastors are shamed because they're insufficiently vocal about this or that outrage or not militant enough in the culture war. And if we just stop there, I think we can say that's fair. Right? We know that depending on your political viewpoint, you're either going to be conservative or maybe a little bit more progressive. Maybe we're not going to use the liberal term, but you might be a little bit left-leaning. That's how he's going to put it in just a minute. So depending on that political viewpoint, you're going to want your pastor to say certain things and to make a priority of saying some things. And so I think that's fair to say that, there's a lot of this going on and a lot of people who are asking their pastors to step into the void online and, come out with their statement on this or that. We have churches all the time. Guys, you don't have to make a statement about everything. Churches, I don't know, what are you doing? But for some reason, a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, maybe because they feel pressured, maybe there's something to it in this article, but they feel like they have to make a statement about everything. You don't. You don't have to make a political statement about every occurrence that happens in the world. But, we've seen that over the last couple of years. Every time they're just like, hey, you know what? We got to put a statement out there. The world is waiting for us to say something on this issue. Maybe they're not. But a lot of pastors feel that kind of pressure. So he goes on. It seems there's a lot of social media mileage in throwing pastors under the bus. In other words, it's popular. And this is where I start to go like, okay, this feels personal. Like this feels like someone who, like he even says, I've noticed in an increasing prevalent genre. That's your personal world, and I think that's kind of seeping into this article. There's a lot of social media mileage. In other words, it's really popular to do this, so some people are just going for it because they want to get popular. I don't think that's the right tone in this article. Like, I want to be clear. I don't think this article is that bad. It's the tone of it and the things that are said without any I don't want to just say nuance, but I want to say just like they just kind of bluntly say something, and it's like, wait, you gotta be a little careful about how you word some things and give a couple little stipulations for why you're saying something. But as far as substance goes, I don't think this is terrible, but it's a little interesting. We'll keep going. All right. The formula is familiar. A highly online Christian. And this is where I was like, oh my goodness. I tweeted this the last week, whenever this came out. Highly online Christian. Guys, it's 2022. We're all highly online Christians. I don't even know what that means. He links to another article that he wrote, and he kind of talks about these people that are constantly online. But that's everybody. We're all online. You're online right now. You're watching this video. Maybe you're on social media talking to different people throughout the day constantly. We're all doing that. Churches are even doing it. A highly online Christian takes to social media to put generic pastors, and this is again like that personal thing that I think is like kind of seeping into this article. This, like, he's basically what I think happened here is that he had someone in his sphere, maybe not even his world, but a friend of his or something, that got trashed online by someone in their congregation, but refused to talk about that specific pastor, and just said, pastors are like this. Pastors do this. They aren't brave enough. They aren't going to say what needs to be said, that kind of thing. And so we can kind of see this as a theme throughout this thing. To put generic pastors on blast by unfavorably comparing them to secular thought leaders or politicians who are supposedly more courageous truth tellers. Fair point. Don't compare a pastor with a politician. Those are different gigs. Those are different roles. And so a pastor is supposed to shepherd the flock. They aren't supposed to be worried about every political, endeavor that's out there or every political movement and have something to say on that. So I think that's fair. But is this a good faith critique, and is it helpful? Pummeling your pastor and, putting a slash there to help you see that it's not just, you're just saying pastors. The pastors online. Few call out their own pastors online, but many employ the imprecise word pastors. Every pastor in the world, every American pastor, a few notable pastors, you're subtweeting to advance a narrative of negligent clergy sitting out the culture war. Often the social media posts focus on a timely front in the culture war and turns it into an indictment on beta pastors who are allegedly what is up with this stuff? Okay, let me pause for a second. Enough of this alpha beta stuff. And red pill, blue pill, is this the Matrix? What is going on? I see these kinds of terms all the time. This is Gen Z stuff. But let's see. Beta pastors who are allegedly naive about the issue's gravity. Wake up, pastor. So this is the kind of thing that this person says. Wake up, pastor. While you're trying to winsomely engage the culture is indoctrinating your congregation with fill in the blank and all different kinds of ideas. Quit sitting on the sidelines. So that's something that gets said all the time about pastors. And if you're a pastor, I bet you can relate. As someone who just even has a YouTube channel, where it's a public platform. I get messages all the time saying, are you going to make a video about this? You're going to talk about Tim Keller? Talk about Tim Keller. If you don't talk about Tim Keller, you're a coward, like that kind of stuff. Maybe I just don't want to talk about Tim Keller right now. But I get that. I understand it. There are people who are saying, you need to speak about this thing. And so this is the conservative side. And then you got the other side. Left-leaning Christians also join the pastor as punching bag social media chorus. Their posts similarly indict pastors as a vague class, taking them to task for enabling various evils. Pastors have blood on their hands. Their cowardice in staying silent on fill in the blank, racism, Christian nationalism, abuse. He said it. Okay. Some people, I posted a little bit about that and, got some interaction. He's the one who says abuse here. Okay. AR-15, mass shootings, climate change, and so on means they have zero moral authority on any issue. All right. I'm going to stop there, but he goes on throughout the article and he's kind of just saying, pastors are getting just pummeled online from both sides. They're just getting shot at from both sides because they're not going to say, they're not going to post that thing that you want them to post online, whether it's a video or on Facebook or Twitter. They're not going to retweet the thing that you want them to retweet. And so all the conservatives take aim saying he's a liberal. All the liberals or left-leaning people within the congregation take aim at him because he's a crazy conservative because he's not saying these things. The problem with that is that some of these things are more important than the others. Okay. If you look at that, like I said, he said abuse. I didn't insert that into the article. He said it. I think that's way more important than some of this other stuff that's being talked about. Some of the other straw men, some of the other arguments, both on the conservative and on the left-leaning side. I think that when you say, oh, you're just not talking about abuse, I do think that's actually pretty cowardice. I think you're being cowardly if you're not going to talk about the issue of abuse within churches, because this is not just a popular thing. This is a thing that is prevalent. It's not just popular because a few people are talking about it online. We're seeing these stories pop up within churches. If you're an SBC pastor and you didn't talk about abuse in any way when things were going on, I think that's horrible. And I think that's a little bit more than just not talking or not saying something about CRT or not talking about gun control. That is a different thing because we're talking about something that actually affects the church in a very specific way. And so the article continues. And, some people are like, well, hey, I could really relate and I appreciate what he's saying because I'm a pastor, because I'm someone online and I get those kinds of things. I understand that. But when you're saying, hey, stop criticizing your pastor and you're saying from both sides, what that tells people is one, that you're saying all these things are of the same importance. That's what I gather from it. And then two, it's that you shouldn't criticize him ever. Not online. To which I say, no, actually, you can criticize. I think that's totally fair. Now, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And saying a generic term instead of talking about your specific pastor, I think that's a smart thing. I don't think that's a cowardly thing. I don't think that's an offensive thing. Would you rather have someone go online and say, Pastor Bill Johnson, not that Bill Johnson, but just a Bill Johnson at First Baptist Church of whatever city you live in is a coward because he didn't talk about would you rather have that? A generic way of saying, hey, pastors need to pay attention to this or wake up, pastor, because of this. I think that's fair. And guess what? The pastor doesn't have to listen to all that criticism. The pastor knows, you guys know. If you're a pastor, you know that there's that criticism out there. So what? You don't have to listen to that criticism. If it's something that actually you think applies to your church or applies to your situation, you can deal with that. You can go and talk to that person if he is a congregant or someone that you know. You can have a discussion with them and say, hey, what did you mean by that? I took this as this. and have a conversation with them. You don't have to go back and blast them online too. You could just talk with them. I don't think it's wrong to go online and say, hey, this is an issue that I see. And when you're saying the left side and the right side, they keep on attacking this guy who's supposedly in the middle, who doesn't have a position that he's coming out publicly on it, that, both these sides are attacking him. What you're really saying is that nobody gets to criticize that guy in the middle. I don't think that's fair. Pastors are people, and they are leaders, and they're public leaders, and they should, when it comes to something specifically, I'm thinking right here on this issue of abuse, I think you should say something. I think that your congregation deserves that, to know what your position is on that issue that affects your specific church, because as we look at all these studies, we're finding out basically every church has some story of abuse within it. Like, I think that's totally fair. Now, you don't have to have a position on all the others, but I think it's totally fair for your congregant to go online and say, pastors should say this. Because you don't have to do what that congregant says. You don't have to. Now, if they're being divisive and they're like going at it like crazy, well, then have a conversation with them. Go and have lunch with them, do some discipleship, sit with them and be like, hey, you can't keep going online and blasting people. They know it's me. And I don't think it's biblical for me to, I'm assuming that the reason why you're not saying something or saying something that they don't like is because you believe it's biblical. Well, talk with them about it. It's okay. It's all right. So I think that criticism can be a good thing. Now, I do think that there's actually a lot in this article that you're talking about bad criticism. Just poor criticism where you're taking something that's really like a secondary issue and you're throwing at the pastor and saying, you got to say something. If you don't say it, I'm out the door. Well, one, those people who usually say that, they already have a foot out the door. We're not talking about the people who are serving faithfully every day or every Sunday or every day of ministry within the church. We're not talking about those people. Those people are ready. They've already tried out that other church. They've been checking it out online. They're ready to go there. It's okay to be able to be like, hey, you know what? With your political viewpoints, I don't think this is going to be a great fit for you moving forward. Maybe it is time to, go check out that other church. Church hopping isn't a good thing. All right. When you're just going from church to church and church and not having any accountability and not having any relationship, that's not a great thing. Okay. But sometimes you just need to go to a different pasture. And sometimes that's going to make everyone at that church have a little bit more unity, that there isn't going to be like this divisive voice among them. And we're not talking about someone who's giving false doctrine. All right, who's standing up and being a heretic. That there's a very biblical way to deal with those people. But someone who has a very, political stance and they're being very blunt about that online, maybe they should go to a church that agrees with them on that thing. I think it's okay. I don't think it's life ending. Should it be that way in a hypothetical world where everything is good? Maybe not. But that's not where we live. So, I think we just need to be honest with one another on these things. But this article, I think, kind of failed a little bit in that where it was very personal and basically saying nobody can attack the pastor or nobody can criticize him, which I understand. There's too much criticism that's going on of pastors on these political things. But some of these things are not that political. All right. It's there. It's in the article. I didn't make it up. He's the one who said it's one of these issues, and I just refuse to agree.